Harvey's Hot Takes with the host of Overdrive on TSN Radio, Bryan Hayes. Or you can listen to Bryan's show the way I do. You can just go to wherever you get your podcasts, and you can listen on podcasts. And for the last little while, Bryan and the crew have been spending a lot of time talking about a scenario that to me seems slightly unlikely to happen, but I love it anyway. What are the reasons, Bryan, that you feel Sidney Crosby and the Toronto Maple Leafs might be a great match at this point in time?
Well, I have many, many reasons for this. And if you'll allow me to take the floor here, Jay, I can take you through every possible layer. And I appreciate, why you're a little bit cynical with this and a little bit, I guess, pessimistic when it comes to this idea actually come to fruition. And I'm not necessarily against that. I mean, ultimately, it's going to come down to Sid. Does he ever want to leave Pittsburgh? He's going to be the driving force on whatever happens with his career, and he deserves that level of respect. Would Kyle Dubas ever actually be comfortable making a trade with the Maple Leafs? Do the Maple Leafs have the asset if this, the assets available if this hypothetical ever came to fruition? All of those different pillars have to be knocked down, and I understand that. But if it ever got to a point where Sid, and I hope it does get to this point, and I said this on your show a year ago. It was about a year ago I came on here, and I said, get Sid out of Pittsburgh, because I was fearful that the exact scenario that's playing out right now was going to play out, that he was just going to fade away, racking up points, still being a great player, still being a competitive player, but from an NHL standpoint, it was going to become ultimately irrelevant because of the team. And they're worse than I thought they'd be. And here's a news flash. They're only going to get worse, Jay. Pittsburgh's only going to get worse. It's only going to get uglier. So I'm hopeful at some point Sidney Crosby says, I can't do this anymore. And if he ends up doing that, what I've been hearing from a lot of people, and admittedly, I said this on your show a year ago, maybe Boston would make sense. Maybe Colorado would make sense. And I've been watching the Maple Leafs all year like I do, and I'm looking at the scenario they find themselves in, and it's the Maple Leafs that would make more sense than I think anybody else. And if it ever got to a point where Sid said, okay, I'm open to having this conversation, I might want to move somewhere. I might want to go somewhere else and play out the rest of my career. Toronto, in my opinion, has got to pick up the phone immediately and call Pittsburgh and do whatever they can to try to make that deal work. For a number of reasons. One, that's what they need to put them over the top. I think they have the goaltending in Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz. I think they finally have the defense. Certainly the top four solidified. McCabe and Tanev, a great pairing right now. Oliver Ekman-Larsson has fit in beautifully with Morgan Rielly. They need to attack the middle of the ice, and that's what Sid can still bring. He's a winner. He's a veteran. He plays the right position. The assets can be there, and ultimately the window is going to close in 2 or 3 years anyway, because I know there's a lot of naysayers saying, well, you're going to give up futures to bring in Sid, and he's not young anymore. He's only got a couple years left. They've been running down this road in Toronto for 8+ years now with Matthews and Marner and Nylander and Rielly. You throw Sid into the mix, you're declaring this is the window. This is it, guys. If it doesn't work, we're going to probably have to go a different direction completely. And getting back to the start of this, if Sid wants out, if he ever thinks of legacy, because he's won cups. If he goes to Colorado, you're following in the footsteps of Ray Bourque and what he did. But Bourque was chasing cups. Sid's not doing that. If you go to Boston, it's the same kind of thing. They've won recently. The Leafs haven't won. It's the ultimate mic drop on an all-time great career. You come up here, you close the door, you are an absolute legend for life, and he already is. He's one of the all-time great players, and I know this is the ultimate hypothetical, but I think it could make sense for Sid. I think if you're Kyle Dubas and the Pens, you know this organization better than anyone else, so you can pry out the pieces that you want. And if you're Brendan Shanahan, Brad Treliving, and you realize you have a 2 or 3 year window, you make it work. You bring in Sid the Kid, and you close the window in 2 or 3 years. So sure, it's a hypothetical. Sure, it might be unlikely. But if it ever came to a point where it could be likely, I'm saying I think the Leafs need to do everything they can to entertain that.
I'm saying I can't wait for Pittsburgh's reaction to your hot take. Let's switch over to the Leafs Scotiabank Arena Cousins, the Raptors, pulling off, as some have said, Bryan, the most ethical tank job in NBA or perhaps sports history. They are now 4-14. Everybody's trying to capture the flag. Everyone wants Cooper Flag, the presumptive #1 overall pick next year. My question is, if this team starts to get healthy, this Raptors team, should management actually add? Should management actually let this team go for it? Maybe even try to get into the play-in this year?
Not this year. Not this year. This year, you got to commit. You got to commit to the tank. You're already deep enough into the season. right? You're almost at the 20-game mark. You've done it. You've accomplished it. You've set the tone, right? Masai Ujiri set the tone at the opening of the season at the press conference where he said, yes, we're rebuilding. That's who we are. That's what you are. You only want to do it for 1 year. You've already laid the framework for it. You've let your fan base know what's coming. And they've been a pretty entertaining 4-win team. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, almost impossible to believe. But their young players have played well. And they do play with heart. And they are in games. And they're losing buzzer beaters. But losing is the appropriate way to go for 1 year. But it can only be 1 year because it's a very slippery slope. You don't want to slide into a scenario where Detroit's been forever, where Charlotte's been forever. There's a number of teams. And I don't think they're the worst team in the league. I think Washington is the worst team in the league. I think Washington likely will finish with the most losses. And I'm not sure the Raptors are going to be the second or third worst team. But I think bottom 5 puts you in a position to chase Cooper Flag. My understanding is there's 4 or 5 studs in this draft. Make sure you get one of them, because you've gone this far into it. And it's going to get more painful. But I think what we're seeing already with the injury reports and the way that they're handling injuries would tell you this is the way they're going to play it, Jay. Right? Grady Dick's been really good. He's out with a contusion, a calf contusion. He's got a bruise.
Yeah.
He could play. Right there in New Orleans, they're like, you're not playing. You got bruise, that bruise is flaring up. You're not playing. You might actually help us win a game. And New Orleans is so bad. It's the same thing with Quigley. Quigley, he fell opening night on his back. He had a bruise for a couple of weeks. And they're like, Emmanuel, you're not playing. You might help us win. So Quigley couldn't go early in the season. Same thing with Scotty. He could have been playing, I think, with a mask. And Scotty Barnes, they said, just take your time. So play this season out.
Right.
It's gone this far. You're not very good. You're not going to win a lot of games. It's going to be painful. Do it this 1 year, and then next year you got to change the culture and you got to commit to winning.
Trust the process. I like that. It's worked for Philadelphia. Oh, wait, never mind. Let's move on. Juan Soto. Juan Soto, Brian, as you know, the premier free agent available in Major League Baseball, apparently could be making his decision about where he'll play next season before the winter meetings. That's December 9th in Dallas. Among the finalists rumored, the Toronto Blue Jays, along with the Mets, the Yankees, the Red Sox, possibly even the Dodgers. The question for you, Brian, do you think that Juan Soto will be on a plane to Toronto when this is all said and done, unlike a certain someone else a year ago?
No, I don't think so, and I can't fall for it again. I can't do it. I won't fall into the trap. I'm not doing plane gate, right? I'm not tracking flights out of the L.A. area and if they're going to land at Pearson and, it's flying over the Midwest right now. I'm not doing it. I won't do it. I will not commit to that anymore, and I think I speak for most people that are affiliated with the Blue Jay fan base, and I cover this team closely here in Toronto, and what's upsetting, Jay, is that what happened last year, what you just referenced with Ohtani, was so deflating, was so heartbreaking, and in the end, embarrassing for a lot of people, myself included, because I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Like, this guy's actually on a plane up here. Yusei Kikuchi is renting out sushi joints in Toronto because they're going to have a party for Shohei Ohtani. That was the kind of stuff that was going on here. But on top of it, legitimate insiders in baseball were saying this is going to happen, or very likely could. So it wasn't as if people were completely duped. Right? There were legitimate insiders in baseball saying, I think Ohtani's going to Toronto. And we know what ended up happening. He signed with the Dodgers. And then after that, I think a lot of people in Toronto said, man, that's just something that I feel like I was duped.
Yeah.
I feel like I fell for it. And that's what's disappointing here is Juan Soto's a great player. Great player. And he may simply be looking for the most money. And if it is that simple, the Blue Jays do have a legitimate shot at getting him. I don't think they will, but they could technically pay the most money. But I can't even go down the road of dreaming of Soto in a Blue Jay uniform anymore because of what happened last summer. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of Blue Jay fans. I think ultimately he wants to stay in New York. I think he'd like to be a Yankee. And what is unfortunate here is based on what happened last year, where the Jays probably upped the price for Ohtani to go back to the Dodgers. It might be happening again, that the Blue Jays have officially reached a status here within the big fish free agent game as just being the pawns. Give us your best offer so we can take it somewhere else. And again, I think a lot of Blue Jay fans just aren't willing to entertain that idea. And if that is the truth, and if that is where this front office ultimately is in this organization, they've got to find a way to reverse it. Because you never want to be a pawn in a game like this that's going to benefit players who ultimately never come play for your team.
Well said as always, Brian. And just like Harvey's has been serving up delicious burgers to Canadians for 65 years, Brian's been serving up the hot take since 1983, the year the Blue Jays finished 4th in the American League East.
Hot Takes is presented by Harvey's. Customize your burger and get it delivered from our app to your door. Harvey's, it's a beautiful thing.